We're into our final session now with this drawing. Hopefully you've watched the previous three videos that covered the full creation process. So we're at a pretty good point now. You can almost leave it at this stage in terms of detail that we're trying to get out of this reference. But there are some things that we can do to push it forward. So one of the last things we need to do is, this was meant to be a chalk and charcoal. So we've got all of our charcoal in place, but we want to do some slight heightening lifts with this white chalk just beyond. I mean, you can see there's not a huge step up in terms of the value of the paper compared to the value of the white chalk, but it will just push some of our highlights a little bit higher. In terms of materials, I've got the chalk, and then I've got a slightly harder charcoal, so I've got an H charcoal that I'm working with, sharpened to a point, just like the previous videos. I've got my mahl stick to rest my hand on, and I'm just going to get a piece of eraser as well. So I've got a small piece of kneadable eraser as well, just for some fine point picking. Because mainly what we're going to be doing today is just kind of rendering out the drawing, completing the rendering of it. So we'll start with this, adding this white chalk. And as I say, it's primarily going to be for the brightest highlights. And there aren't tons of those in this drawing. So one of the main points that we can see there's quite a strong highlight is, just shifting my mahl stick around. The front of this nose. So I just want to make a slight alteration to the shape of the nose in preparation. Not too bad. And also, when we're adding the white chalk, we don't want to blend too much between white chalk and charcoal, because it can sometimes take on a slightly strange sheen. So we want to make sure it's clean before the highlight, basically. And the important thing with working with the white chalk is the fact that the paper becomes a halftone rather than the highlight itself. Very often when we work with white paper, the paper is the highlight, but in this case we're applying a highlight specific. So we'll add it in that brightest point, and then we just want to sort of taper it out a little bit. About there's pretty good. So then we've also got a little bit of a highlight on these glasses. So I'm going to thickly lay the chalk in there. And then it also runs along the top of the glasses too. So again, I want to make sure there's enough distinction, or that I'm working directly over white paper and not any charcoal through here. A little bit on the inside of that glass, and we've also just got the tiniest section in the far part of this glass frame. About there. So that's pretty good for our highlights blocked in. There is a tiny bit actually, so the other place I've noticed it, and we're not going to do tons because we're not going for a complete sort of full rendering, but spend a little bit of time just making the ear a little bit more complex. There is a little bit of highlighting going on through the ear. So we can add some slightly more complex rounded forms to that ear. So just go in and soften some of those forms out a little, make them a bit more complex. Before adding just a few little highlights. It's not always important to get the ear sort of totally rendered in, but in a profile it's sometimes a bit more useful, just because we see a bit more of it. Like it's quite an important part of this image. Got that roughly rendered in pretty well now, so I can put again a little bit of a highlight just there, another little note in here, a little bit in the center of there, and sort of slightly running up. We're not going to, pretty much everywhere else is a lower value than that, so we're going to spend a bit of time smoothing stuff out, but that's about it for our brightest values. We also might put a little bit of effort into just adding some darker tones as well where necessary, so bottom of this cap for instance, just to emphasize it, could do a little bit of a darkening. So at this point of the drawing, we're just looking for where we can kind of make things a bit more complex or a bit softer if necessary. So keeping our charcoal sharp. going in and just reinforcing any sections that need any kind of reinforcement in terms of values. So that means sort of darkening things. And for any little details, like that's just adding a little bit more of a sense of the nostril in. Bottom of the nose before the reflected light. And softening that into the shadow below, just below and on that top lip. Filling in some of the patchiness that's developed. It's very slight what I'm doing. You don't want to add or take away loads of tone at this point, which is why we're working with quite a hard charcoal as well. Why it's important that if you can get hold of these sorts of graded charcoals like Nitram, it's worthwhile for these sorts of rendered or more sustained drawings. Just give you a lot more control. Just flicking it kind of gradually backwards and forwards over the surface. Making sure that tone underneath the chin is dark enough. Likewise behind this ear. Making sure the penumbra, which is this the shadow as it gets softer as it moves away from the ear, is sufficient. Going to sharpen my charcoal again. Go back in and just again any of these sort of errant little strokes or marks. Can just soften out slightly. Sort of thinking about it, kind of reassessing it. I would say we maybe need to go just generally a little bit darker. These tones just a bit further back from the front of the face. So even this late in the drawing, we're thinking about the overall sort of big picture of it, so how those tones are relating. So that's quite a big kind of change to make. Still only adding kind of slight tone. I'm just trying to make sure that the drawing captures the overall sense of form, so where that highlight is, particularly now that we've got the highlight in, it stood out a little bit more as an issue. And we're pretty much there, I think, with this one. You can always push stuff sort of further, obviously, than wherever you get to with the drawing. Things can always get more rendered. But we don't entirely lose the sort of immediacy or the looseness of it. This seems to me like a pretty good place to stop. One final thing I'll do, just again with sharpened charcoal, is just go in and make sure the portion of the background that's kind of immediately behind the front of the face is nice and smooth, because if it's too patchy it makes it a little bit harder to read. It's also kind of nice to darken it slightly just so that it emphasizes the face and light, which works quite well. As it gets a bit higher up, sort of up into this area, we don't have to worry so much about it being super neat. Just more that portion right in front, maybe bring that out a little bit further so it doesn't look too much like a kind of darkened border. Then it sort of vignettes out. Same, kind of just a little bit on the back of the head as well, just even that out slightly, and that's pretty good. So yeah, we're definitely in a point to leave it now. If you can find a good reference or get someone to sit for you, you could have a crack at the same sort of drawing. You could also try it with slightly darker paper. So this isn't the darkest possible paper that you can do a chalk and charcoal with. You can go a lot darker and then the chalk stands out more. But for a sort of subtle highlight that you have a bit of control of, this kind of level of paper is nice. But yeah, that's it for today. So we'll be starting something new next time. As always, you can subscribe to the channel and follow upcoming videos, or kind of see videos as they're posted. You can also follow the link through to sign up to OCAD Studio for support on any of the projects you make. So any projects you make from workshops or sessions, courses posted on here, you'll be able to send through to myself and other tutors. We've got a bunch of expert tutors, so have a look at that. And if you're interested, you can sign up. But yeah, that's it, and I'll see you guys soon.